up tonight. I don't see anyone else lingering in the hallway, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. We're here for our Washington Heights Subdivision Drainage Improvement Project, Water Main Replacement, and Road Reconstruction Project. I am Lee Schultz. I'm the city engineer with the city of Southfield. And with me tonight, I've got Matt Slicker and Jim Beal. They are with Hubble, Roth & Clark, who are the designers of the project, and they'll also be managing the construction. Construction's being done by Paymar Enterprises, and you may already know that because they got started about 3 weeks ago out there. I am going to ask that we hold all the questions until the end. Cable 15 is recording this presentation, and so we'll get through it. They'll start airing it on Southfield Now as early as this Friday, and you can find it on YouTube and looking through the social media for the city of Southfield if you want to see the presentation again. So this is just the project location area. I'm sure you all know your subdivision pretty well. You'll see the only streets that are not included in this whole area are those 4 streets off of Southfield Road. So back in 2015, those roads didn't have water main at all, actually. So that was a smaller capital project that we installed water main on those streets and then redid the roads at the same time. So the scope of work for us, we are replacing almost 21,000 feet of water main. We're replacing this with 8-inch C909 PVC pipe, and we've got about 21,000 feet of storm sewer that we're installing as well. And this is a full upgrade to the existing drainage system, and we've had a lot of drainage issues in this subdivision over the years. We've been looking at, resolutions to these drainage issues, it seems like for a couple decades now. And all the ditches are planned to be enclosed. We're still gonna have more like swales along the road edge that will drain to the catch basins instead of the deeper ditches out there. So the goal is no more water standing in the ditches for any prolonged period of time. Once the designers were out there looking at everything, they're just like, it is so flat out here. There's like no surprise that water would often stand in the ditches. So really burying that pipe in the ground that we can get slope on and keep the water moving. There is a county drain that runs through the neighborhood, so we have a good outlet. We just couldn't make it drain by gravity through those open ditches for so many years. So this is a pretty large investment, will be a nice improvement for the neighborhood. So we've had about 4 miles of local streets that are in the subdivision that will be totally reconstructed. The total cost of the project, including the engineering costs, are $16.5 million, and it's being funded through our local street fund and a water and sewer bond fund. The city went out for water and sewer bonds probably 3 years ago now, so this was one of our targeted projects that we wanted to expend those funds while the interest rates were low. So it was just smart thinking ahead on the city's part so we could move these projects forward. So you're aware we started work the week of November 6th, and this is a large project area. We are expecting the work to continue. They will work through the winter for as long as the weather allows. Sometimes they might take off a little bit of time in January or maybe early February, but it really depends on how harsh our winter is. If the temps, allow the workers to still get out there and be able to do the work and the diesel equipment running well, then they'll be out there all winter without pause if they can. It's kind of nice for them to work with the ground frozen. The frost only goes down so far. It just keeps the work site a little more stable, less muddy, less dusty, and most people are inside through most of the winter. It's a nice time for us, for the neighborhood too, to have as much of that underground work done as we can in the winter. And this is just showing the phasing. The phase 1 project is happening in the southern half of the subdivision, shown in blue here. And that's where the contractor has started now with some of the storm infrastructure and the water main work. We expect the transition from stage 1 to stage 2 to happen about early June. And so in the spring, once the weather breaks, hopefully the contractor has most of that stage 1 underground work done, and then that road prep can start and be real productive as soon as the weather allows in the springtime. I did just want to notice, or mention, so I didn't forget, that very cul-de-sac part of Lafayette Circle, that's the newer piece that was added on about 20 years ago. That area is getting the road work redone, but their water main and storm infrastructure already exists, and it's only 20 years old, so there won't be underground work, a little less disturbance up in that cul-de-sac area. And this, I just kind of wanted to show, we have a lot of wide rights of way in this Washington Heights neighborhood. The contractor oftentimes will be looking for vacant lots. I don't think you have a single vacant lot in your whole subdivision, so there's houses everywhere. And so a lot of the staging of materials will be either along the road edge, or we have a few locations where it's just, there's actually right-of-way there, as if originally there was planned to be a road. It is city-owned property, but it's just grass. The adjacent properties just, you know, use it as their own, but you'll see some staging of materials. Some of the rights-of-way from the road edge, most of them on the normal size right-of-way streets go back about 20 feet from the edge of the pavement, but then we have other streets here that the right-of-way goes back about 50 feet from the road edge. We're doing quite a bit of work with the storm sewer work and the water main work, so you'll see heavier disturbance. I just wanted to point it out, especially on corner properties. That's the contractors tend to stage a lot of their materials there, and I didn't want you to be surprised. And if there's any question, you know, because they will for sure be keeping all of their work within the public right-of-way. We're not doing any work on the private property. It's just the right-of-way is large in some locations in the subdivision. And so the water main work. So this new water main will primarily be installed just by open cut trenching method. That's the traditional method of water main. We just have a few select areas that the contractor is planning to use a directional drilling method. That's a trenchless technology where they open up 2 bore pits and they bore the new pipe in the ground without having to do that open cut trench. So it's a little bit of a different operation and different equipment that you'll see on site for those locations. And some areas we might do that if there are a lot of mature trees or landscaping and we're trying to get through a certain area, we may elect to bore under rather than trying to squeeze between mature trees. We do try and preserve as many trees as possible, and right now this project isn't including or anticipating any large tree removals. So the water service, with this water main work, your water service will be disrupted about 2 to 3 times during the project. So the water gets shut down when they're tying your water service from the old main over to the new one. And then it's also shut down when they're tying in the new water main to the water sources at each end. So you will receive advance notice when this water main is shut off. Because we'll be tying over the water services, we do get eyes on that water service. So if any water service material is found to be other than copper, the property owner will be notified. And at that point, we'll coordinate replacement of that line all the way up inside the house. The law requires us to go 3 feet past the meter if that's anything but copper. So that's a lead service line or a galvanized pipe or the 2 other pipe materials that we sometimes find. We're not expecting to find any non-copper services in this neighborhood. Southfield, just the era that our housing was built, doesn't have much of it. But here and there, we will sometimes be surprised by 1 or 2 on a project, and we'll reach out to you directly if that's the case so that we can take care of that. I was going to mention some of the existing water main. Most of the pipe material is pipe material that we don't use anymore. It's been in there for a long time, which is why we're trying to get in there to replace it. We definitely have a water main break history. For most of the subdivision is existing cast iron pipe, and that's usually where we get our breaks. There are some we call AC, it's asbestos cement pipes that are in the ground. AC pipes are usually pretty stable if you're not working around them, but once we start working, that's something to keep in mind. If you haven't received a water shutoff notice and you see work happening outside and you lose your water, sometimes when we're working around these old mains, we will see breaks and then there can be unscheduled shutdowns. The contractor is usually walking around knocking on doors if that's the case, just to let people know. And usually within a couple hours, they're making whatever repair needs to be made to get everyone's water service back up and operational. I also like to mention if you've had a water shutoff, a scheduled water shutoff, which would be typical, at the end of the workday, if the contractors are gone and you don't have water back, that is not planned. We would never leave you purposely without water overnight. So please call us, anyone on the team on your construction notice, if that happens. Sometimes, especially for corner properties, we may think you're connected to a water main over here and that we've got everyone hooked up and maybe you are on, like hooked up on another street or something, or mistakes happen. It doesn't happen often, but it's happened probably 2 or 3 times in my career, and I just like to mention it at these meetings. We would never leave you purposely without water. So we'll send someone out, even if it's after hours and it's our own water department, to come out and take care of it for you. And lastly, with the water main work, when the water mains are getting shut off and turned on, that can stir up sediment in the old water mains, or sometimes sediment in your own plumbing in your house when that water is coming on and off. So if you're seeing any cloudiness or discoloration in your water, I always recommend that you just do a little flushing. Flush it at a fixture that doesn't have a screen. So like at your bathtub or your utility tub, just let it run for a few minutes until it runs clear. If it seems like your water's back on and your water pressure is low, sometimes people will find that, like at a kitchen sink or a bathroom sink, there is a screen on those water fixtures that can be unscrewed, like cleaned out. Sometimes sediment will actually start collecting in those screens. So that's usually when we get those calls, that's the first thing that we recommend, is that you try and clear those screens. If that doesn't do the trick, we usually work with the water department and have them come out and make sure that there wasn't something that got clogged in the actual water meter. So that happens much more frequently than leaving your water off unexpectedly, but we probably get half a dozen or so calls of those on a project of this size. So just something to be aware of. So the road work, really all these roads are going to be totally reconstructed in asphalt or concrete. So whatever the material is now is what it will be reconstructed in. And that will occur after all of the underground water main and storm work is complete. Driveway approaches. Driveway approaches, we're probably touching pretty much all of them, but we're only replacing as far back as we disturb. So if you're on a side of the road that has a lot of water main and storm work, it may be your entire driveway approach. Maybe on the other side of the road, it may only be 5 feet. So we are just replacing what we need to that's impacted by the road construction. Property access. So the access to your homes, we will be maintaining for your personal vehicles and of course for emergency vehicles, school buses. We do notify the schools of when these projects start, just so their bus drivers are aware. It's really up to the school. If they choose to temporarily relocate a bus stop or something, they will communicate that directly to the parents. So the driveway access, the only time it's really limited for people is people on the concrete streets. So the concrete obviously has a cure time that people can be out of their driveways for about 10 days while that road pavement's curing. And then if you have concrete driveway approaches, it would be a similar another 10 days. And you will be notified for overnight parking. Once the project gets started, code enforcement will be notified to not do the overnight ticketing when we start these paving operations, because you will, unless you coordinate maybe with a neighbor on another street and you want to share a driveway while your work's being done, otherwise you'll be parking in the streets. But you'll be permitted to park overnight. If anyone gets a ticket, you call me and I'll talk to code enforcement, we'll have it taken care of, but they're usually pretty good about it. And just some other frequently asked questions. We work with the contractor to make sure the mail and trash services are, of course, maintained throughout the construction project with minimal disruption. If you haven't received mail for like a few days in a row, reach back out to us and we'll work. First, we'll assess to see what's going on site, make sure your mailbox and everything is standing as it should be. And we'll work with the post office, do what we need to do to make sure that the mailboxes are accessible. And any damages to sprinkler systems that are in the right-of-way or mailboxes sometimes if they have to be relocated. Excuse me, a lot of talking. Anything of that is damaged will be replaced before the construction ends. And do you mind finishing? It's not coming back.
Like Lee said, we do our best to avoid any tree damage or landscape damage. If you've got something special in the right of way, that we might even ask you, like there's some rocks or something special to you, or we might ask you ahead of time, or is there a bush that we need? We can work around this bush, but if it's something you've been looking to get rid of for a long time, then we'll, and we need to get rid of it too, we'll ask and reach out to you. Just try to be patient with the contractor as they go through the subdivision. There's a lot of work going on, they have a lot of equipment. The way their operation works is that they're usually occupy one spot in the roadway. You can go one way or the other, try to avoid going through where they're working. They will keep you going through there, but we're gonna probably have some actual signage. So if they're working on a certain block, you'll know before you turn down there that, hey, I'd probably want to avoid that today, because there's a lot of different routes you can go through that subdivision to get out and get on the road. One thing Lee mentioned is about the cure time of the concrete. So on the concrete streets, there's a delay. We'll work on trying to get you either parked, be able to park outside your driveway or in a very short distance on the other side street. We haven't really decided. Sometimes we do it like half the road one way, like the north and south side, or or each direction. Sometimes we'll just pick a spot in the middle of the road and do that whole direction, and then split the other half and do it the other way. It just depends how long the road is and what's the best place for people to park at during those times. The asphalt roads, they pave them. Usually you can drive on them in a couple hours, so the contractors themselves will keep you off that portion of the road during that time, but within 2 hours you can usually drive on them, and then there'll be another period of time when you're going by and doing the driveways and you won't be able to get in your driveway, but again, that's for a couple hours, and you'll be notified when that's happening. And let's see. I think that's really all you have. The sprinkler systems, it's good if you do have one that and you know anything about it. You can either mark the heads for the contractor, or we try to have our inspector keep a good record of where we find the heads and whatnot, because they'll come back and there's a lot of sprinkler systems and no one ever knows where all their lines go. So what we do is we pull them up, we cap them off, so you can still use the rest of the system, but the system out in front that they've disturbed is no longer in use. Okay, and they'll address those. Restoration is going to be topsoil, seed, and mulch. So they'll try to do that as early as they can in the spring on this first phase. Likely if it gets too late in the spring, we'll probably hold them off on doing any more, because the success rate without having water continuously isn't very good. And what'll happen is we'll just get a bunch of weeds, and that'll be a bigger problem later on next time. So they might wait, but hopefully they'll be able to get all that done in the first phase before it gets some growth before it starts getting too hot. So with that, if anyone has any questions, we can answer those.